Welcome to the Airflow Podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Thomas, and this is the place where Kingdom heirs go to be informed and inspired. So sit back, relax, and flow with me. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Airflow Podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Thomas, and today I have an esteemed guest, Dr. Pernella Deems. Dr. Deems, I'm going to go down some of your accomplishments, but I just want to say thank you for coming and joining the podcast today.
You are more than welcome. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so you are currently VP of Student Engagement at Campus Life and an associate professor of psychology at Kentucky State University in Frankfort, Kentucky. You got a double major, Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Sociology from Southern, Master of Science Counseling Psychology from Southern Mississippi University of Southern Mississippi. You got a Doctor of Philosophy and Counseling Psychology from, and I got to put an emphasis on this, the Tennessee State University. And you also have completed a program in Women in Education Leadership at Harvard. You've worked at University of Memphis, Nashville State Community College, Grambling State University, Grambling University, Talladega, and of course, Kentucky State. So you've had a great experience, not just HBCUs, but you've also had some experience in PWI. So you know, you've got an amazing, just your accomplishments that you've done working and as a student. You know, you've had experiences in both places. So explain to me and to the listeners, for you, what has that HBCU experience been for you?
Wow. So the HBCU experience for me is the simplest ways to say family. My parents are alum of Southern University. And so I'm actually second generation. My oldest sister and my middle sister also graduated from Southern University. And so I've been on that campus since I was, 7, 8 years old when my sister was in school. My dad talked about it all the time. And so when I applied to college, I only applied to one. I only applied to Southern University because it had been ingrained so long since I was a little girl.
Right.
But on that campus, watching my sister and her friends and, seeing the professors being in the lab because she was a science major, just watching all of those different things, watching the sororities, the fraternities, the young people outspoken in class, watching the, African-American professors, that just was something I was just drawn to since I was a little girl.
Right.
And the family experience, my sister always brought home, people on the weekends, the holidays. Yeah. So getting to watch that was just something I always saw. And it was my experiences as well.
Okay. So yeah, that's cool because like you said, you had your parents, you had, your older sister. So you had a lineage of HBCU experience that was right there from your immediate family. Which is a beautiful thing. And I think a lot of people, they may be the first generation at a lot of HBCUs, a lot of times at HBCUs, but you having that. So, for you, it was like, if you went somewhere else, it might've been a problem.
Right.
And for those that don't know, I just want you guys to understand, for those that don't know what HBCU is, it's historically Black colleges and universities. So I just want to put that out there because, there are some people that don't know. Right. It's obvious that, your love for HBCUs came from, your, like you said, your parents, your sister, and then your experiences there. When you talk about just HBCUs, and I see it a lot of times, just knowing you personally, you beam with excitement for being a part of HBCU and having that lineage. And now you have, children and they're, looking at that, and I'm sure they've seen the experience. I know you take them to, different classics and things like that. So they're getting that well-rounded experience. So how important of that to you is it to you to really ingrain that into your kids, about not necessarily forcing them to do it, but letting them know that there's great opportunity and it should be definitely considered as an option to attend an HBCU?
Yeah, so definitely not forcing, but making sure they do understand that I just encourage it to be somewhere in their process. I desire for them to go higher than me. So, of course I have a doctorate, so
right.
That's at least some level of graduate school. But, I encourage them that make an HBCU at least a part of your process. Be it if it's undergrad or if it's for grad. But again, like you said, my daughter's third generation. She's a junior at Xavier University in Louisiana. My son is a high school senior. And of course, as we're looking, I'm like, okay, let's look at these.
Right.
Because I know what you can get from this experience. I know your personality. I know that you would thrive in an environment where you get that family experience, where you don't feel like a minority,
right.
Where you have that opportunity to meet other people from different places. African-American experience is not singular. You're going to meet people from the North, South, international, who've had different experiences. Some will be first generation, some might be fourth generation.
Right.
And so you get to learn from not only your peers, but the richness of what every professor, wherever they've gone, they're bringing that experience into the classroom as well. And HBCUs draw such a rich, intellect into that whole faculty system and that student affairs system as well. So I know there'll be great opportunities in that smaller, nurturing environment. And so that's part of why, I actually do push it. I know what I, experienced, and I know how it made an impact in me going to the next level. So I want to be able to do that for students. And I know I definitely want that for my own children.
Yeah, and I just thinking back on my experience at TSU, and just knowing that it was that sense of closeness, but faculty, they took pride in not just teaching about African American history and just showing, it's just about educating, higher level education for African Americans, understanding that the opportunity that you have wasn't always available for us, so it was a great experience. And, it's one that I think I appreciated it more once I graduated and left and started getting out into the world. I appreciated it, but I didn't think I appreciated it as much until I got out of, got out of school and started living, as an adult. And I was like, man, I actually did have a good experience at HBCU. And I would definitely, my oldest, she didn't choose that route. She had a couple places that she was interested in, but she didn't. But, we've got our second oldest, he's 2 years out from going, and that's the conversation we're having. Like, we don't want you to exclude it. I want you to make sure it's part of the process, because there's a great opportunity there. Like I said, small environment, teacher student ratios are a lot better, and you will be nurtured. You're going to be pushed, but there's more opportunity for nurturing and mentorship and things like that that's available. So I always want to keep that up there, but we'll see what happens. So for you, now you've been going through, and whether it was school or where you were actually teaching or, working as faculty and staff, in these different places that you've gone so far, you're also a wife and a mother. So how was that trying to balance it all, in pursuing your degrees and career opportunities?
Yeah. So that's, I don't know, it's kind of funny, because my children, I have 4 children, and when I had my oldest daughter, I was in graduate school at that time, University of Southern Mississippi, fresh out of HBCU. I graduated at 20, going on 21.
Wow.
And when I went to graduate school, I didn't even realize how much my HBCU prepared me for the world till I walked into graduate school. And of course, it was at a PWI, and I was the youngest person in my class, the only African-American in my cohort. And, I just reflected back on just what I learned, how to speak, how to present myself, how to go the extra mile with research and studying, and, especially going in there and having, getting ready to be a parent as well,
right.
Having to balance, and also almost having to teach other people how to balance, teaching other people how to be receptive to differences. There are going to be graduate students who have children. And I had to show that to some people, and they can make it, and they can, survive and thrive through their education. And then it's funny, when I started my doctorate, was getting ready to expect my son. So I had two children in graduate school at two different schools, two different experiences. And of course, with him, I was at Tennessee State University. So I was back in the HBCU environment. And that was also just, phenomenal, where administrative assistants were, can I help babysit? They
Wow.
came to the hospital, when I delivered, they came and visit, they, bought food. So, you was still getting that nurturing experience, even as a graduate student. And, even the wraparound, the students, they were wanting to check on you and make sure you were okay. So again, that family experience. And then I had my last two children early career. At that time, I was working at a community college. So, my children were a part of everything that I did, having them through graduate school and early career. And then the big part of that, what you mentioned with, being married, my husband and I went through undergrad together, and, we did some of our programs in graduate as well, both being in school. And so the balance was, the big thing. And, being able to communicate through that, take a, bet on me.
Yeah.
Even though this is a struggle, if I could get through this, then we'll help you get through that.
Right.
Bet on me so we could get through this process together.
Yeah, and I commend both of you, both doctors, and I've had a chance to watch, just how you guys the family has grown, and then you guys continue to accomplish things, so, being a wife and trying to do that is difficult, especially being in different areas at times through that process. And then now you tack on, you got 4 kids through that process. So, it takes a lot of strength to do that. But, I'm glad you mentioned that, your HBCU experience, it really, when you had the kids there, they were actually like the whole community was around, and it was like the village, like African proverb, it was a village that helped to do that. So it helped make the experience a lot better. But yeah, I always commend both of you for doing it, because I know there was times where you had to sacrifice, and one of you was sacrificed for the other, but it was for the greater good. And now, here you guys are where you're at, both doctors, both thriving. And now, the kids have kind of a benchmark to look to say, if mom and dad can do it, I did it, and we're, HBCU student, grads, we came from that environment. So, again, you can be successful. And I think it knocks down that narrative that, going to HBCU or, you're going to have less of a real experience to do well professionally. And so I'm glad to hear that, because I want people to understand that it's HBCU should be an option. It shouldn't be an alternative.
Oh, yes.
When people say alternative, it's like, well, it's not the same, it's like taking a name brand versus generic brand, it's just what you want from the institution. So I really love that. And I'm glad you mentioned that. But, one of the things I want to mention too is, the journey that you had as a student, and really through everything now, your current role that you have, as a VP there in charge of student engagement, how is your experiences kind of help bubble up into this role now, and how you felt the success, I guess, at Kentucky State, really being involved in student activities on a day-to-day basis?
Right. And so my background, of course, psychology and sociology. So, fundamentally, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with groups, you're dealing with systems.
Right.
Then, of course, my graduate concentration is counseling psychology. And so I chose not to go into therapy. Even in my process, I saw my degree somewhat as a means to an end, means to accomplishment to get to that next level in higher ed. So I started off as a faculty member, coming right out of graduate school, but then shifted into having the opportunity to be a dean of students, and now, vice president of student engagement and campus life. But the mental health, the counseling, all of that training is stuff I do every day. The big part of what we do is customer service and problem solving, mentoring, leadership development, nurturing our students. There's no day that's ever planned out that's the same. It may be that you're dealing with some crisis intervention, and maybe dealing with, first generation students and their adjustment process. It may be upper class students in their leadership and mentorship development, them developing their own programs and planning. So it's no day that's ever the same, but it's such a rich experience to watch, these students who are getting ready to be alums and, make their mark and make their impact, and everything from freshmen on down to the senior year. I'm also checking, you're making sure you're going to class, making sure you're, qualified to be in these programs, making sure you're creating opportunities. We have over 50 clubs and organizations. And one of the things I tell the students is, if you don't see anything that you like or you think fits you, we will help you create those opportunities as well to create organizations. So, it's a great, place to see entrepreneurship thrive, to see group development, to see the leadership, to see their own ability to problem solve and, deal with and learn differences, meeting people from different places, and just watching that whole evolvement, watching, leaders develop. And one of the things we always say, we don't have leaders and followers, we have leaders and more leaders. And so to watch other people in their roles and being mentored by your peers, it's an awesome experience to watch. At the same time, are you going to class? How are your grades? Do you have a minor? Still checking in on those other key pieces that will help them to thrive in that co-curricular environment.
And as a parent, now as a parent hearing that's something that you will want your environment, you want your kids to be in, because it's not that you need somebody checking in, but it's good to know that you've got people that are encouraging your kids to keep moving, keep pushing, making sure they're taking care of business. They know the ins and outs, kind of the things that the world may not teach you necessarily. You got to teach yourself. They're learning these things now, so they're prepared. Because I will say, and you mentioned it, I felt like I was really prepared for the real world when I left TSU, and that's in different ways. And some people look at it like, well, what do you mean? I mean, just going through the registration process, going through all these different, I mean, it was different back then. We didn't have online registering, you had to fill out this little form and then walk back and forth. And that was the experience at most HBCUs. And it was a reason for that. We'll talk about that later, but we also had people that were helping me through the process. There were different faculty members, and just like, I know this is difficult, but they were encouraging, this is what you can do. And if you were willing to talk and explain what your challenges are, there was always somebody there that would help you through that. I felt like that experience I had that rich experience at TSU, and I've heard that from other people in other HBCUs that closeness, that support was always there. Now you had to be willing to do the work. You had the support if you were challenged with anything. So, and that's what I loved about it. I'm not saying that's not available at PWIs, but I think it's more so ingrained in what we do at HBCUs, because, we understand that there's some disparaging differences between, how people of color have been treated over time and how they go out into the world. So I think that preparation is key, and that's a key moment, because college is the bridge between, for most, if they're going straight from high school into college, it's that bridge between childhood and adulthood, and it's a lot of forming that's taking place then. So I definitely, I always appreciated that. And so I'm glad that that's still going on. And, having a role like yours seems to be something, and I don't know, is that a role that's something at all HBCUs, or is it specific to?
Yeah. So most institutions, the key areas are the academic affairs, and then on the other side, the student affairs. So, making sure that they have the academic enrichment and that experience, and then the student affairs side, which you'll find like your SGA, your dean of students, your mental health, your student health, all of those key areas, are structured that way at most institutions overall. But when you said that about, that how it happens at HBCUs, it's just, I find it to be very organic. I find it to be that you naturally fall into those roles, even when I was teaching, it's not uncommon for students to call me Mama Deans.
Okay. I was going to say that mother role.
And they always just did it. It's just, I didn't ask for it. It just happened. And then now it's I get more of an auntie. So they call, it's the TT role. Yeah. Getting more, auntie here at Kentucky State. But it just was natural almost everywhere I was at. It was a Mama Deems or, auntie or some kind of experience like that. And when you have that, again, organically, you want to look out for your students a little bit more. You want to watch what they're doing. You want to make sure you're seeing them day to day. You want to make sure that they're fulfilling their experiences. You want to make sure that, hey, I didn't see you, or, how you midterms is coming up, and, how your grades look. So you see something in them and you kind of push it for a little bit more, because they do remind you of your nieces and nephews. They remind you of your children. They remind you of your siblings. They remind you of people from your neighborhood. And so you want to make sure that they are successful.
Yeah. And that's big. And it's big in the sense that, just as a student, the challenges and everything that goes on with not just being a student, but just being in society. And you're not shielded from that just because you're on a college campus. But, for some students, they are first generation and they're going away to school and they're in a different environment. Some are coming from major, big city areas, and they're coming to these small towns where a lot of these colleges, HBCUs, are located. And, the one thing that they always want to have is somebody that reminds them of that one family member that they are around. So, you being called Mama Deems or Auntie, those are terms of endearment, but that allows you to connect with the students and allows the students to feel like they have somebody that they can go to that's right there. And again, that makes them want to thrive and do well, because I'm pretty sure they say, I don't want to let you down. I don't want to let you down, not even because of their parents. They're like, I don't want to let you down because, I have people that's around me that care. And that's that small community environment. That's really what helps to nurture that even more, because you have people who care and they want to see you do well, and they're invested in your success. And it sounds like that is a lot of what your role is really investing in the student's success. But it is organic because, like I said, you see yourself, your family in some of these kids. And so they take that and they're just feeding off of that. And it's like a really organic situation. It's not something that's forced because I'm your academic advisor and, my job is to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to do these things. Like, no, I some of this stuff I do because I really want to, and I want to see you succeed. So that's good. That's really good. You mentioned mental health, and I know that's one of the big things that has been, been discussed lately. And when we talk about mental health in college, how have you seen things shift since the pandemic came about, and from last year going into this year, with just students and mental health overall?
So, I always remind people that our African-American students were dealing with dual pandemics. It wasn't just COVID-19, it's also some of the racial injustices that were happening across the country, that you're dealing with, and, in the middle of a huge election. And so, these students were, dealing with things that happen. I'm here in Kentucky, so we're right here.
I was going to say, you're Frankfurt.
So many students who, were in the middle of what was going on with Breonna Taylor, and so that was home for them.
Right.
And so they're right there in the middle of the heart of that, along with COVID. So it's like, I want to get out and, speak for my community or get out and protest, but there's COVID, so what do? I have this voice and I have these things that I want to say, and I want to, speak out, and I want to show for unity and solidarity. But, there's a dangerous, physical health kind of scare going on at the same time.
Right.
So when you're dealing with that and, all the other things as well, and, not being able to go out, some of these students were affected by, their high school senior year, virtual, their freshman year virtual, not being able to interact, not having those milestones of crossing the stage for some of them, losing people, losing family members, losing friends, not having the opportunity to have closure in the midst of some of those challenges by, even things like having a funeral service or something like that. So they're dealing with these dual pandemics. So of course you have the impact on mental health and well-being. You're trying to adjust, you're trying to transition into college life and the college experience, along with all of these other different things going on at the same time. And then access, some of our students, the college campus is their home away from home, is their escape, is their place of identity. And so not having that space or having the traditional experiences that you typically would have had on a college campus, may have affected part of their process as well. So, you definitely saw a rise in mental health concerns. And, we try to be as proactive as possible by making sure counseling services are available for our students, our after hours crisis line, all those different things, resources, tons of programming.
Yeah.
Virtual and in-person program check-ins, just how you're doing, even having quiet spaces to study, just so they're not locked in the room, the whole time if they have virtual classes. So that was a big thing, for us, is just making sure that they had access, resources, even being able to get out and get fresh air, trying to do outside events, but still trying to make sure they had a great experience was something we really worked to do.
Yeah, I know, just the HBCU experience of being able to go to games, see the band, pep rallies, all that stuff, to come into a school and you're excited about that opportunity and know that you're not going to be able to do it because of, the pandemic from just the health side with COVID. But then, when you tack on the other things, so there was a lot going on last year, with the election, like you said, the injustices that, happen. And then you tack on the fact that you are stuck in a health scare and you can't get out and move around like you want to. And for young people, I know that for them, it was trying to figure out how do they channel that anger into something positive. So was that something that you guys really had to be mindful of as faculty and staff with the students in their interactions? Because I'm pretty sure there was some shortness of just from just attitudes and just things like that, and trying to keep the environment positive, understanding that where they are, where you guys are there to build them up and give them at least an opportunity to try to voice some things, maybe not in person, but, creatively come up with ways to put things out there. Because I know as a 18, 19-year-old going to college and you're seeing all this stuff and it's affecting your community and you can't do anything, there's a lot of bottled up frustration. I felt it as an adult,
right,
and seeing it in the corporate world and how people just kind of brush it off. So I can imagine being, young and seeing this and you feel like you're helpless. So it was good to see that you guys have the programs and put things out there for them to for students to be able to access that. But yeah, I already knew, just talking about, classics and things like that, like seeing all that stuff getting canceled. I'm like, I know people at HBCUs are going nuts not being able to do that because, just to go see the band play, sometimes it's not even about the sporting event. It's just the band playing at halftime, and coming in. So not having that is a big deal. And alumni are the same way, like I want to go, check that out. So that's good that you guys have that. And I think that, again, that just shows the importance of having that community, because you have people that come from a lot of the same communities in different cities, but have a lot of the same feelings about this stuff. And you guys can have good dialogue around that and be able to teach them and help them navigate through those feelings, which is very important, especially nowadays, just with everything that's going on. And that's why I feel like it's important to have HBCUs out there, and to keep them moving and funding and thriving, because, again, it's an option that a lot of people need. Just thinking about, I know people that was going to HBCUs, when I was in school, and for them, they would rather be on the campus than they'd be at their own homes, because their living situation at home and their environment wasn't the best. So they were just fighting to stay in school, to come to summer school, figure out ways to do that. And for some, it saved their lives, being able to be in school. So I'm sure you had those experiences as well, where people were like, if I didn't come to this school, I may not be here right now. So, and how does that make you feel to know that impact that you have in somebody's life, a young person's life?
Yeah, even before getting into that, you mentioned the classics, and I just wanted to mention, for some people they just see it as a game, but you talked about the band, and it's the talent. Is a lot of times the classics include career fairs, alumni who provide opportunities for jobs or on site, and you have that family reunion kind of element where to see your classmates and your peers. And for those who want to expose their children to them, one for me is the Bayou Classic. I always, been bringing my children to them for years, but I want them to see and experience, the excellence and the educators and all those different things. And so that was a big thing for me. But those classic experiences and those homecomings, that's the family reunion.
Right.
Sometimes that's when you see your roommates and your suite mates and your peers and professors, all of those just walking around and just, getting together again.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, the question you just mentioned of, how the HBCU, serve students. You do have some people who deal with housing insecurities. And so that is their place of safety.
Mm-hmm.
You do have people who are, growing into their own experiences and opportunities. So the institution itself, it may be a source of employment, like if you're RA, or if you work, anywhere else on campus, it's a source of employment.
Right.
It's a source for you to, and again, you mentioned before that development. So I'm growing into who I am, into my career, into my interests, in the things that I like, learning new people. So the institution itself provides just that holding place per se in your development. And so it means a lot to a lot of people. That love they have for the institution is not just the institution, but it's what the institution did for them or gave to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gave friends, it gave safety, it gave purpose, it gave development, it gave a sense of unity, it gave balance. It empowers you. And so with these institutions, especially these HBCUs, there's so much to look back on because they gave you such a forwardness while you were there.
Right. And that's why I say I always look back at the journey I had and was like, man, I really appreciate it. Every day I appreciate it. Like even watching my kids go through certain things, I'm like, man, they'll see when I remember certain things going through the HBCU process, and it's like, man, I really do appreciate what I learned. My kids are like,
oh, yeah.
How are you able to manage this and that? They asked me, because both my wife and I went to TSU, and I'm like, how did you guys manage to do this? And how do you focus on this and that? I'm like, college prepared us for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that we learned how to deal with corporate, and you brought up the fact of career development, things like that. One of the things I loved about my HBCU experience was we had a lot of opportunities to network, especially in the engineering
Mm-hmm.
department at TSU. We had a lot of opportunities to network with companies out there where there were leaders, African-American leaders that would come in and either they went to HBCUs or they're just big proponents and help to recruit from there. And they would actually come in and offer internships. They would provide scholarships to the program and I was a recipient of one of those scholarships. So, having those kind of experiences, really help. I mean, when you talk about propelling
Mm-hmm.
you to the next place, I mean, it does help. And I know, like I said, from the engineering department, but there's other departments who had money come in just from their networking with, those other companies that are out there. So it was definitely a good thing. But a lot of people don't talk about that, but
Right.
it's something that we call out. Like my wife, she had a scholarship through General Motors because Saturn was here in Tennessee.
Right.
And so they had a lot of people, and she wound up interning and starting her career in engineering there. So those little things that, big companies, Raytheon and all these other places, you hear of these names, and it's like, they have people who are, in from HBCUs in environments that they may not be big time known, but they pump in a lot of time and effort and energy, money. They come back to give during homecoming or classics, when they offer those, or even we used to have, different work opportunities to come in and learn about career fairs and things like that. We always had career fairs, like for
Oh, yeah.
anything, even if it wasn't for something that you were interested in doing when you graduate school, there were job opportunities. Hey, when you're, it's not necessarily an internship, but it could be something that goes towards your, what you're working towards in your degree, where you can work during the year, so, it can help to minimize the financial aid gap that you may have. So, those are the experiences that I know, if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would have been, right now because of what I got from being at TSU and at HBCU. So yeah, I definitely think that's good. I'm glad you brought that up when I mentioned the classics because, there's a lot more than just that. So I appreciate reminding me of that piece of it. one of the questions, and we started talking about, you know, a little bit more with HBCUs and the development that you're seeing, but you know, there's still some questions and people still ask, you know, is it important for HBCUs to continue to exist today? I think we touched upon it, you know, from the overall experience of, you know, the development of the person. But I think it's also important to talk about some of the discrepancies that you see, and I'll say between going to some of the PWI, not all of them, but between HBCU and PWI, when you talk about financing these universities, you know, just the overall support that you have from students. One of the things that I love about HBCUs is that, you know, you will see across the board, they're typically tuition rates are lower than some of the PWIs. And people don't understand what that does, because it helps those that are, you know, that are in lower income areas, that they can still afford to go to school. There's tons of grants and things out there, but, you know, how do you think HBCUs have helped to close the overall racial wealth gap?
Mm. Yeah, that's the big one, in that you know, over 80% of some of your professional, I believe it was your dentists and your you know, I think it's your judges, your lawyers, your 50% of your African American MDs, you know, their experiences come from HBCUs. And, you know, HBCUs are at the top in producing, you know, African American professionals. So you see that impact in bridging what they call that middle class, or HBCUs helping to produce the Black middle class. But you also have to look at the other piece. You know, you mentioned the funding and how these institutions have traditionally been underfunded. And as you see what's going on with TSU.
I was going to mention that, but go ahead.
Undermatched and
Right.
blocked for certain fundings and opportunities. And then also just the overall, the fact that that institution is where it's at. There are some impact studies. I know UNCF, United Negro College Fund, they do huge impact studies every year showing the impact of having that institution in that city, and the financial impact that it provides to that city and that community, you know, the jobs for, you know, if an institution employing over 600, over 700, 800, sometimes 1,000 employees who are giving back to that community. So just the impact of just having that institution and in that area.
Right.
You know, having that institution draw in, you know, funding from classics, draw in, you know, money and tax, as well as once they produce the alums, these alums are giving back, and they're also again adding to that middle class. So it is, you do see where the HBCUs are helping to bridge, you know, that wealth gap, but also just the overall impact that they bring into that community.
Yeah.
What they are, and traditionally have done more with less.
Yeah. And you know, just some of the studies and stuff that I've looked at before and even recently, you know, just understanding that having a degree, you know, having the ability to obtaining a degree is, you know, it increases your earning potential, you know, when you graduate. You know, and they say the difference between a high school only graduate versus a college graduate in terms of their lifetime earning for wages is like $1 million.
Right.
You know, so again, having that access for, I say African Americans, but really HBCUs is really open to all people of color.
All people always have been, have been.
And it's just called that because, you know, originally that was one of the big disparaging things is, you know, African Americans weren't allowed to go to a lot of these PWIs back in the day. So now it's like, hey, we're going to start our own. And they were thriving. But then, of course, when that money wasn't coming in and people were like, I'm not going to those other schools, and they started creating other opportunities through different endowments and things to lure, you know, your more talent, your smart, you know, or more athletic African Americans to go to these bigger schools, taking away from the money that was coming in. But like you said, we continue to thrive even without that. You brought up what happened in Tennessee State with Tennessee State University, and I just want to point this out for everybody. But a study was done last year, and they found that dating back from 1950, that TSU should have had over $544 million that was not given to them to be able to operate. And a lot of people don't understand, when you have state funded schools like HBCU, state funded schools, they're supposed to have federal and state funding. Right. Well, state of Tennessee wasn't kicking in their part. For the most part, the federal government, they kicked in their piece, but these schools were created to operate off of that budget. So when you're not getting those funds from both sides, that's a challenge, and you can't, it's hard to operate off of that. And you have to figure out where you can make cuts. And, if you're not getting the donations and you're not getting the money that comes in, because they're not generating the big TV contract money that some of these big schools are getting. They're not getting that type of thing coming in. So, I wanted to point that out because, figuring out how to operate with less, I've always heard people say, well, the facilities at PWIs are better. Well, there's a reason why, because they have the funding to be able to do that. They're like, well, the athletic facilities are different. Well, again, and we'll get into this a little bit too, because I want to get your opinion on, this resurgence and this newness of, these pro athletes that are coming over after they retire and coaching at HBCUs. So I think it's a great thing, but there's a huge discrepancy in just the money part of it. And when you're not getting the money, when you're basically cheated out of, $544 million over a 72-year period or 71-year period, that's like over almost $8 million. Right. So $8 million can do a lot for an institution. When you talk about, from the faculty, staff to things on campus, programs, different things like that. And that's just from what they found from state funding. There's other funding that's been, mismanaged that was supposed to come in from the state and other areas. So, and the federal government doesn't always have the ability, or they choose not to kick in all of the funds when they're supposed to. So when you're dealing with that and you don't have these huge endowments from a lot of the alumni or just other interest groups and stuff like that, that HBCUs have, some of them do, some of the bigger ones that may have some, but you think of these smaller schools that don't have that same, the playing field isn't level. And so to me, that's why I think it's very important to continue to support HBCUs, but also understand that when you have that gap in funding, you have funding that's being held back, you have to pick and choose where you can use things and how you can make things work. And so people just don't get that. They're like, well, I don't want to go to that school because their dorms don't look the best. They don't have all these things. I'm like, but you got to understand, they still give you the same opportunities, and again, it's not an alternative. This is an option. This is another option for you, but you understand what you're getting may be more than just the way the dorm room looks. It may be more than just how that building looks. Are you getting a quality education? Yes. Are you getting the experience like we mentioned before? Yes. You may not have that. You go to some bigger institutions and you're a number. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that everybody that goes to those institutions have that same feeling, because there are some people who have fine mentors in there, but I'm just saying the way HBCUs are set up, like you said, it's an organic process, and it's set up to be a community to help people thrive, to help these younger minds thrive. And even, some of the older folks that want to go back to school later on, it still creates that same environment. Because I saw quite a few folks that were definitely older adults, on campus, walking around and still, mingling in with the younger students and creating that whole environment where it was like this. I remember a lady, she was like an auntie. There was a guy that was older, gray beard, everything, when I'm in school, and he taking classes next to me, and I used to call him uncle, just wasn't being funny, but he reminded me of one of my uncles, so I'm just like, hey, unc, and I just walk by and just keep it moving, just checking. He would make sure I was good, and he would try to share knowledge with me and things like that. So, it was good to have that, and that those were the experiences that you have. So you try to push that out there to combat the economic gaps and why people don't choose not to go to HBCU, because they come up with these things like, it's just inferior, and that's not the case. But when you're losing money like that, you know, it's hard to manage that. And I'm sure you guys have experiencing that at Kentucky State.
Yeah, and I always like to say, African Americans belong in all spaces.
Yes.
So even when I said, as I introduced myself before, I had experiences, educated at two HBCUs, but as well as the PWI, worked at PWI Community College, HBCU public and private. And we belong in all spaces.
Right.
And I know that, one of the things, HBCUs, a lot of them are concentrated in the South. And so for some people, there are different reasons. They may have received a state scholarship in a state that doesn't have an HBCU, or it may be more convenient for them to stay closer to home,
right.
So whatever the reason. So for different, for those particular reasons, I understand. I think, as you're mentioning, sometimes people may, some of the narrative is less than or inferior. And, as you speak against that or speak against that myth, and as we try to, as we work to debunk that myth, you see it in the numbers, look at vice president
right.
Of the US, and so other people just as qualified and, successful in their places of industry and education, employment, health, the healthcare field, excellent leaders and scholars who come from HBCUs and have great, experience, and those HBCUs were their first choice.
Right.
Those HBCUs nurtured them to, that place of prominence and intellect and, all those other things that go along with it in that training and development. But, I'm one of those people that, on that debate wagon, I'm not going there because they're relevant. Even for you to ask the question, are they still relevant? That's your answer. Because you're asking a question, that's your answer. They should still exist because of the fact that, institutions exist. If this institution was founded in 1886 or, 1875 or whatever year if it was founded, and I want to go where my grandparents went, other schools, other students make that choice. They want to go generationally. So that's one answer in itself of why they should still exist.
Yeah. And I've had people ask that question, like, well, why do we even still have HBCUs when, with other schools are trying to be inclusive? And I mean, we kind of talked through some of that. One of the things that I was looking up some different things about, again, kind of with that question. And, there was a Gallup poll that was done about 5 years ago or so. And they mentioned that students attending HBCUs reported a higher sense that their professors cared about them. They felt more supported. They more often found mentors. And then there's also studies that show that there's an improved mental outcome from students at HBCUs because they face fewer microaggressions and outright instances or racism, which we kind of touched upon too. You don't have those saying, not from the institution. Now, in some of the cities that these institutions are in outside of the campus walls and things like that, that could be a place. But in the school themselves, students feel like they can be themselves, that come from some of these different ethnic backgrounds. And I think that's really the important part. They can be themselves and still be able to thrive because they don't have to conform to what people think what the traditional college student should look like, should be like, this is the path they should take, and you still have that opportunity there. And again, when I say this stuff, I don't mean to say that, our experience is just limited to this field. Like you said, we can fit into many different modes and we can go into different spaces. And we've proven that. And whether it's in government, corporate America, just any in medicine, just in any field, we can fit in. And it doesn't matter whether you go to a HBCU or not. But again, it's just to point out the fact that at a HBCU, those opportunities are going to be nurtured to help you. So when you walk out of that institution, you should feel, most of the time you are better prepared if you've done the work, if you've fully invested yourself into what the experience is all about. You will see that you will be successful out in the world because you will know you're prepared. And like I said, that's what I look back at and say, yeah, I feel like I definitely got my preparation from that to when I got my first job. When I graduated, I was prepared. I knew how to interview. That's one of the things that they taught me at TSU. how to interview. So yeah, it was just, I just think about again that whole experience, and I just think about standing in these career fairs, and having advisors and mentors saying, hey, this is something that you were interested in looking at, you might want to talk to this guy over here, and I go see somebody that looks like me in a suit and tie, who's, part back then they didn't really talk about STEM that much, but is in the STEM area, because I was looking at engineering. I was working as being as an engineer in school for that. So having all of that there and being able to just look around this huge auditorium, is all these companies, whether it's medicine, different fields, whether it's, psychology, nursing, just whatever it was, there were so many opportunities out there. But it wasn't just like you were being herded in there. It was like, hey, there was some real thought into this. And then you would go talk to the people who were presenting and who were offering, talking about their companies, and they were just able to really relate to you and talk about what the opportunities they've had. And, a lot of them went to either that particular institution or they went to another HBCU, and they can talk about how their experiences and all that stuff. And so it helps you, especially if you didn't have that kind of backing from home. If you're first generation, you didn't have your parents didn't do this, or you didn't have your parents around, and you just kind of like your opportunity to go out and really set yourself up for the world. They didn't have experience like you had, or maybe me, where we had a strong family foundation. It was, something else totally different. So having people guide them through the process, like I mentioned, the registration process.
Right.
If my parents weren't there when I went through the registration process, they dropped me off and said, peace, I had to figure it out,
Right.
But it was cool because once frustration, challenges, all that stuff, but having those people there to walk you through it. So finding a career, making sure the major is good, making sure, you got the right classes, all of that stuff was so important. But then just checking on you to make sure, are you good? Is there anything that you need? I had teachers that would ask me that. They were like, oh,
right,
you seem like you're down. Like, you seem like you're just not yourself. Or like you said, I missed you the other day, or, hey, you missed class. Is everything okay? Or, like that's, my sister went to a big school in Michigan, and, I know her experience was different. Now they had clubs and groups where they would, where they would try to have support system, but it was the students that really ran that, which is good, which is cool. But, when you have faculty, staff, and everybody else involved into helping you push through that, that just makes it even better. So, I definitely appreciate that. Last thing I really want to focus on, or just ask you about, and I brought it up a little earlier. So there's a lot of publicity now with, like Coach Deion Sanders and Coach Eddie George at, Jackson State and Tennessee State respectively. And they're coming in and they're shedding a lot of light, and it's more than just the athletic side, but they're shedding a lot of light about just HBCUs and, what the offers, how they can do things, and just the financial differences and all that stuff. And they're really causing a stir, which is good because it's causing conversation that should happen, on bigger stages than they have been in the past. But how have you liked seeing, this new resurgence of all these pro athletes that are coming back to HBCUs? Some of them never even went to HBCUs, but now they're seeing that there's an opportunity to give back, and they're doing that. What's your feeling about that, being, heavily invested in HBCUs over the years?
Yeah, I think, definitely, I think it's a great opportunity. One thing, Deion Sanders actually did finish his degree at Talladega College.
See.
Yeah,
okay.
right before he did start coaching. Yeah, he did finish his degree at Talladega.
Okay.
And so I think it's a great opportunity for, you do get to see that attention, but also it also brings you back to those previous scholar athletes who did come from HBCUs. You still got to go back and give it to the Doug Williams. You still got to give it back to the Michael Strahans, who are HBCU alums and thriving off the field as well. And so I think this is just another opportunity to see that you can make it and do well in that HBCU environment, and then to use that opportunity for, recruitment, for, again, nurturing, family development. The media, this year, there's a significant amount of HBCU games and classics that are on television. And so you get that another opportunity for recruitment and seeing the talent and exposure. Again, it's just one window for it. So I think it's great. Anytime HBCU gets that opportunity to be in the light, of course, at the games, you're going to get the commercials that show the academic program. So right. I think anywhere you can take an advantage, you're going to see tables and booths for careers and different majors and graduate programs. So, and again, most of the times before the games, there's opportunity for the student leaders to get together from each institution. Right. There's opportunities for alumni to collaborate and, discuss, and maybe fundraising opportunities in that before then. So I think it all ties back to great opportunities for the institutions as a whole to get exposure, to, collaborate, all of that, and, innovation, and I'm going back to, the opportunities that you find. Yeah. In undergrad, I went to Southern University. I would have never thought, not the first, but the second HBCU that I worked at, or the first one that I had an administrative post, was my biggest rival, which is Grambling. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes even the sports gives you the opportunities to see other schools in your conferences, see other schools in place, to just think about them. This might be the next best opportunity for graduate school. This may be just the next best opportunity for employment. This may be the next opportunity for some level of engagement. Or maybe there's a great company in the state where these institutions are that might bridge another gap. Like, of course, Nissan in Tennessee, and they have these different partnerships with Tennessee State, Honda in Alabama, right. Not to call those different places, but you just never know what one piece of exposure from maybe a sponsorship for that game or that classic might lead to something else for students overall. So I think it's great exposure. I think it's great opportunities there.
Yeah, I definitely love it. I've always, people say that any exposure is good exposure, and in this instance, it's definitely driving eyes.
It can be. It definitely.
Yeah, I love the fact that I got a chance to see, TSU play Jackson State on ESPN. Like, that was.
Oh, yes.
That was crazy, but it was a beautiful thing. And, also seeing like ESPN, their flagship show, First Take, they're out there, broadcasting about the game, talking to the coaches, you got the band playing and everything. So it's showing the pageantry and everything else from the athletic side, but it's also, like you said, it's, what people don't understand, the HBCUs, the rivalries, it's like, fighting against your cousin or, your sibling, right. It's all love. You get to the family reunion, y'all competing, little stuff, tug of wars and all that stuff. Afterwards, everybody is cool and they partying together and all that good stuff. It's not like there's a hatred, but the being able to network and, having forums and different things that take place over that weekend just to discuss, how we can better fund our schools, how can we build and, provide more opportunities, through things like this, how can we work to get more endorsement deals that can help fund, because a lot of these schools, they do use some of the money from the athletic program to fund the school. So, people, talk about, of course, Coach Deion Sanders, they talk about him because he's so, flamboyant and boisterous about stuff. No, he made a comment about, people talking about the coach, Nick Saban, Alabama. And, he made the comparison, like when you talk to him, you call him coach, but for me, you call me prime time. I want to be, I'm a coach. I deserve that attention. And after that, he wound up getting a commercial deal with Aflac, but him and Nick Saban together, and it generated, I think so far they said over $20 million. He's basically pumping that money back into the school. So, it's good to see that, and I hope it continues. And it's more than just that, for basketball. You got coaches like Mo Williams, who used to play for the Cavs. He's Alabama State. Sean Gilbert, a former football player. He's at Livingstone College. You got Bonzi Wells at Lamone Owen. He played basketball. Tyrone Wheatley went to University of Michigan. He's coaching at Morgan State. So there's more coaches. And what I've heard and what Coach Sanders said was that, in speaking with Coach Eddie George, he talked to him about not only bringing and raising the awareness for the program itself, for for college football and HBCUs, but helping to really prepare these young boys to become men.
Oh yeah.
And that to me was like, it was great because Jackson State in their first, when they first started playing, Michael Strahan donated, he's got his own clothing line, he's got suits and stuff. He donated suit coats for all the men, for all the players for the Jackson State football team. And because they want to show them that you dress for success, and Coach Sanders is very detailed about how he does things, but he's meticulous and he's outspoken about it because he understands if you look good, you play good, but he's giving kids the self-esteem that they need to grow into the men that they desire to be, and to be able, whether they play on the next level or not, they're going to be prepared for that. So, I love seeing that, and hopefully this trend continues, not just for the athletic side, but I think that helps to bring eyes to the institutions.
Oh yeah.
Some people go to colleges like Alabama and stuff like that because they love the football team, and they just go to the school because they like that, or whether it's basketball, whatever sport, and they get people off of that. And I think we're getting more of that information that the athletics are cool, and that's part of the process. That's part of the experience. Whether it's band, people go to Jackson State or TSU or FAMU because of the band experience. They love the band, and that may have been their first introduction into those schools. Right. So even though TSU's got the best band, but that's for another
hold on.
That's for another conversation.
Hold on.
The aristocrats.
I'm not gonna let you do that. Without the mighty marching thoroughbreds, or the human jukebox, or the world fame. I'm not gonna let you just do it. TSU is my school too, but
I gotta throw it out there. I don't have the diversity. I'm all TSU, so that's it for me. But I do love listening to all the bands, and again, that was just a small part of the experience, but it was a big part of the experience at the same time. So, but
as you mentioned that, I know you started off talking about the athletics, but just the bands, performing arts, the HBCUs, what it provides for students, when so many art programs and music are one of the first cuts you get in middle school and high school. You get that resurgence of it when you get back to the HBCUs and you get back into the platforms to be seen in the parades and to perform at the games, and to go out and tour with the concert level of the band. So that's another thing that HBCUs provided, was being able to get out there with the performing arts, and with the bands, and that big piece of it. The other part I think you're going to get to see is, with politics, Vice President Stacey Abrams, the Keisha Bottoms,
right.
All being able to see, the emergence again, or you mentioned the word Renaissance, but just that level of intellect, being on display again,
right,
in the level of the political realm. So the athletics, performing arts, the medicine, one of your key leaders with the vaccine, African American,
right.
So just in the research, just those, and one of the key players as well with your president at Meharry, in that whole process with the COVID planning and different things like that. So being able to see these other levels of HBCU impact out front and out open, and making that continuous impact, all of that. You'll see it all across the board. Yeah. And I think that's the beautiful opportunity that you have with the athletics, but all those other areas also.
Yeah, because I mean, just the bands themselves. I mean, just the fact that you see them like performing with Beyonce, or you see them at the inauguration, and you see them in some of these major events. And that takes a lot of preparation, but these are, and they get a chance to tour with some professionals. So it's exposing these young artists that want to pursue, music and other things, it helps to push them along. So that's the thing. HBCUs offer just the same programs that other schools offer. They have it at HBCUs, and some of them are more connected in some of the arts, especially than a lot of the PWI. So, it's a great opportunity all around, and hopefully I call it a renaissance. And I say that just because I've known it's always been there.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
So I think the rest of the country and the world is starting to pick back up and see, okay, well, this is HBCUs. And because some of these public forums where you've got big time athletes that are coming to help out and do things, Tennessee State University, yes, they have Coach Eddie George there, but they also have, the former coach Jeff Fisher for the Titans is assisting and helping to help organize some of the team and helping him structure his staff so that he can be successful, and
right.
So you have other people that are giving back because they understand that this is important and is helping to build these players up to be not just players, but just better men, just be better prepared for things. So, that part of it alone is great, but just to see the constant publicity it's bringing to the schools and helping to elevate them is great. So, that's really all I wanted to talk about. I think I really appreciate you so much for sharing that. You gave a lot of great nuggets and a lot of great information just about HBCUs. Just, I appreciate your passion for HBCUs and just education in general, higher education, especially among people of color. And to me, that's great to hear, because so many times people are like, I'm not made for college, and they just want to go do a trade. And if you want to do a trade, that's fine. But take the time. If you actually talk to people, I think a lot of people would choose to at least try the experience and see what it's like if they talk to the right people. I mean, understand what it's helping to prepare you for, and then you make that decision from that, having an informed decision. But I definitely thank you for all of this information. Keep doing what you're doing. It's much needed. I don't know where you're gonna wind up next, because you always doing something big, and I don't mean that in a funny way. I'm like,
no, I got you. I appreciate it.
You're always doing something big. So I know, there's always the next thing for you, but it all is tied around, education and helping, develop students and HBCUs, which is very much needed. So, we've got a bunch more Dr. Pernella Deems out there, pushing our HBCUs. I know we're going to be in a good place in the future. So appreciate you. Thank you again. And, if something comes up again, I would love to have you back on the show to talk about some more things going on from the HBCU world. Well, thank you so much. Well, everybody, that wraps up another episode of the Airflow podcast. I just want to thank my special guest, Dr. Pernella Deems, VP of Student Engagement and Campus Life, and an Associate Professor of Psychology at Kentucky State University in Frankfort, Kentucky, for being our guest today. As you've heard, there's so many things, so many great things that take place in HBCUs. And, this episode wasn't directed to belittle anybody for choosing to go to PWI, which is a predominantly white institution. And that is not the case, but what we want to do is uplift the HBCU experience. Both of us being members of the community, graduates of HBCUs, and Dr. Deems has definitely had a lot more exposure and experience to the HBCU experience, both as a student and as an employee, faculty, or staff member for an HBCU institution, as well as going to your PWI institutions as well. So she's had the exposure, and I wanted to make sure we gave the perspective that a lot of people don't get when you talk about HBCUs. And it's important because, again, from an educational standpoint, I want to promote higher education, and being the heir, that is one of the mountains we want to conquer, is the mountain of education. And we want to show that there is diversity in that platform. There's diversity. There's more than just going to a big school. If you dream of going to a big school and that's something that you've had set in your heart, then do that. But also keep in mind that there's also options. There's other options out there for which is an HBCU. And I mentioned earlier, it's not an alternative. It's an option. Just like you have an option for a big time university, there's also that option for the HBCU, and it depends on what you want and the type of experience you want on the college campus.
because I think you can get all of those things. And you know, again, it just depends on what you're looking for. But as a person of color, you know, and as a graduate of Tennessee State University and HBCU, I know what I've gotten from that experience. And so I'm going to be an advocate for it. But, you know, again, it's all about preference, but I want to make sure that, you know, that preference, that information is out there so that, you know, people can make an informed decision. You know, do some research on the schools, find out what programs they offer, find out what the tuition costs are, you know, find out just the different aspects of it, you know. And I think it will help you to make a well-rounded decision. And that's for those that are interested in going to school or going back to school, because a lot of these HBCUs, they have the same platform to be able to offer online virtual courses. So, you know, again, there's always an opportunity to go back to school. So again, you know, I think Dr. Deems, I thank you all for listening. I just want to, again, make sure you understand that the whole purpose of this is to lift us up as kingdom heirs and to find different avenues that we can continue to build upon and find areas that we can overtake with the kingdom mentality. And education is definitely important. It's important for a lot of reasons, but you know, it's one of those things where you've got to make up in your mind that this is something that you want to do, reaching out for a higher education. And again, there's nothing wrong with saying the college is not for you, but I always say, if you are considering college, you know, think about the different options that are out there. Think about those HBCUs. Think about, you know, the smaller colleges and institutions that are there for higher learning, because you'll find that you'll meet some of the most genuine people and have some of the best experiences ever. And you'll find that you'll have those experiences that will stay with you for a lifetime. So again, my name is Ricky Thomas. This is the Airflow Podcast. And as I'm signing off, I just want to remind you that you were created to be a kingdom heir. So as an heir, it is your obligation to go and flow in everything that God has purposed and planned for your life. Again, thank you for listening. God bless, and we'll see you next week.